We're ready.
Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order with a roll call, please. Marvin Bowles.
Katie Souls.
Brian Circle. Bob Denusey.
Peggy Smith.
And Andy Miller.
We're ready.
So approval of the agenda, okay, please.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Are you recording?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thanks. So on the consent agenda, now we have the minutes from November 13th. And the PC resolution on the 3 mile plan, which is basically kind of just putting this off to the final version, so. So any have a motion on the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right, open forum. Anybody can speak at open forum?
I just plan on quitting Fraser. Mr. Miller, I'd like to apologize for my outburst the other day at the public hearing when they were in executive session up the hallway. So I just want to apologize to you for that. You know, I'm sincerely upset at myself for getting upset with you.
I appreciate it, Mr. Quinn, thank you. Any other open forum items? Anybody online at all? Or-
If anybody online would like to speak, please raise your hand. I don't know if that's
Oh, Joy is on, isn't she?
okay. That's
I don't know. Yeah, so Joy, are you online?
Joy, can you unmute yourself?
I am Andy.
Thank you. So we do
Hi.
have.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are through the open forum and our first major agenda item is public hearing and possible action. Grand Park West Mountain filing number 1. We should open the public hearing in the motion.
I move to open the public hearing on Grand Park West Mountain Highway number 1, turning areas 10W and 11W, and the revised FPDP and final plat.
Any discussion? Katie, for a second here, then she'll spend it. Couple bucks to get the.
I turned my ringer off, but I put my phone in and this boogie woogie too.
So we have a motion and a second to open public hearing. Katie. All in favor?
I
Any opposed?
Aye.
There was an aye from Joy.
Yep.
Okay, so the staff report if we could.
Very well. Thank you, Chair Miller. So the item on the agenda tonight is the final plat and FPDP for Grand Park West Mountain Filing 1. Just a quick overview. Property owner and the applicant is Cornerstone Grand Park Holdings. This development is located north of the proposed extension to Grand Park Drive, west of the Union Pacific Railroad. The proposed land uses include 79 single-family residences. The property is zoned PD. The request is approval of the final plat of PDP that proposed 7 additional residential lots compared to what was previously approved in this application. So I guess just backing up a bit, if it sounds familiar, this item was seen by the Planning Commission in May of last year. It was later approved by the board in June of last year. And I'll just kind of speak to why we're looking at it again as I go through the presentation. So here's a map showing the location of the development. This is from sheet 2 of the FPDP that's in the packet. This next slide shows the development kind of in a broader context of some of the existing development areas around it. That's the Leland Creek subdivision in Winter Park to the bottom right corner. You can see the Grand Park Drive and Oakwood Road roundabout kind of in the center right of the screen. The Village of Grand Park area and Highway 40 off to the right. So again, just to speak to the overall review and approval timeline for this development, March of 2023 was when the preliminary plat and the FPDP were approved by the Planning Commission. The applicant then submitted their final final plat application in early 2024. That came before the planning commission as a public hearing in May, and then was ultimately approved by the board of trustees in June of last year. Since that time, the applicant has been working on addressing conditions of approval that were outlined in the resolution as passed by the planning commission and the board last year. And then in December, just a few weeks ago, we received a revised FPDP and final plat. The applicant just requested some minor modifications to a few lots that were in the approved plat and FPDP. And then January this month, we have the public hearing today before the planning commission. And then we will bring these items to the board next week for their approval. So today, this agenda item is a public hearing. Public notice was published in the Sky High News Middle Park Times 2 weeks ago, January 1st. The applicant mailed out notices to nearby property owners on December 19th, more than 2 weeks in advance of this meeting. The affidavit shown here is in the packet, as well as the applicant's receipts of those mailers that were sent. So to speak to, again, why we are reviewing this item today, there's a section of our code that speaks to modifying approved final plan development plans as well as final plats. So specifically, FPDPs can be modified after they're approved through either a minor or a major amendment. A minor amendment, those are administratively approved, but only applies to fairly limited circumstances. Our code states that minor amendments can be processed for minor changes to the location, siting, and height of buildings and structures, so long as the changes do not exceed 10% of any measurable standard. So it's fairly limited. Basically, anything else, any other type of change to an approved FPDP is considered a major amendment, which per our code requires a public hearing before the planning commission and then approval by the board. So a few examples of when a major amendment is required is if there's a change in use, such as from residential to commercial, when there's an increase in the intensity or density of use, or when there's a rearrangement of lots, blocks, or building tracts. With this application, we have those last two bullet points here. There's a slight increase to the density of use with 7 additional residential units proposed, as well as, modification to the lots that were proposed previously. The final plat is also changing and results in a change to the density that was on the previously approved plat. This is considered a major plat amendment technically. I guess the distinction is that, again, this plat was approved but not yet recorded, so we're not amending a recorded plat. It's simply just going through that review and approval process that a major plat amendment would be subject to. So just to speak to the specific changes, this is looking at kind of the westernmost part of the proposed development as it was approved in June of last year. And if you focus in on the lots here, kind of on the northwestern side, they simply just shrink a bit. They are made less deep, and then there's additional lots created. They're less wide as well. So essentially, the yellow area that's shown there is no longer part of either planning area 10W or 11W. That's approximately 3 acres in area, and again, an additional 7 units are being added. One other thing that I just like to briefly touch on, one of the conditions of approval from last year was the requirement to have an approved water master plan for the entirety of West Mountain. I just want to note that the applicant really has made a lot of progress on this item. That was a condition of approval that was required for the 2003 annexation agreement. As of today, the town has approved the construction documents for the water distribution system for West Mountain. That's what you see here, kind of the overall layout of those water distribution pipes and the location of things like water tanks, PRVs or pressure reducing valves. public works staff as well as staff from Merrick have been working and continue to work with Terracina Design on finalizing some remaining details regarding water tank design as well as the actual kind of water study or modeling document. But construction documents are essentially approved. We have substantial progress on those since last year. So ultimately, staff's recommendation is approval with conditions. I will note that the same conditions of approval from May and June of last year are just carried over to the current resolution. Just given that really referral comments are substantially addressed, we just want to carry that comment forward to ensure that we do our due diligence and make sure all those comments are actually addressed. As well as ensuring that approval is formally granted for the West Mountain Water Master Plan, which we're essentially there. The remaining conditions of approval are all fairly standard items, things like executing a DIA, finalizing the address map, and recording HOA documents. Are there any questions?
So the yellow area in the map behind the lots, what does that become part of?
So essentially that remains part of really no planning area or planning area 23W. I guess either way you prefer to think about it. It just remains unplatted open space property at this time.
But open space is just flat.
I mean, it certainly could be developed in the future, potentially if another developable planning area abuts right up against it.
Yeah, so it's not restricted at this point.
Correct.
I think.
So Garrett, isn't there some open space requirement within individual planning areas that are in excess of 23W?
There are, so each planning area is required to have a certain percentage of open space within that planning area. I could maybe. Might be kind of hard to see from this slide, but I'll kind of use my laser pointer. There are, I believe it's just a single tract that covers the area in between these platted residential lots. I think it's identified as tract A in the plat and FPDP. That is just an open space area. There's a couple trails that go through it, connecting from these two cul-de-sacs down to a proposed trail along Grand Park Drive. But the acreage of this tract satisfies the kind of planning area open space requirement for both 10W and 11W. I believe that figures 10% of the total acreage. And that's also not counting, I will note, the open space that is on each residential lot. That's kind of counted separately from the overall planning area open space.
Single family lots.
These are all single family. Both planning areas, if I'm remembering correctly, do allow for 0 lot line side yard setbacks. I believe the applicant has indicated they would like the flexibility to build like a duplex product on, I think, the smaller lots, which both single family or residential attached and detached is allowed in both of these planning areas. So there's no major concerns with that from staff.
And then no changes to the cul-de-sac that leads up off to the right there.
Yeah, correct. This area remains unchanged from what was approved back in June. Really the only changes with these lots here.
Right. Yeah. Any other questions?
So are you gonna hear from the applicant or just?
Yeah. Yeah, could I have the applicant, please?
Good evening, Layla Rosales with Terracina Design. Good to see everybody. I have 4 slides. They'll be fine. Follow the letters. First thing I want to say is this is just an FYI, we're likely going to change the name of this neighborhood. And so when the final plat and final plan come in for recording, the name will likely change. So just for the record, I don't know what it's going to be yet. I haven't been informed yet. So I'm not in the know. But just an FYI on that. So, again, what we're talking about here tonight is 10W and 11W, which is shown in the blue on this map. This gives you the context that Garrett already shared with you of where we are. So this is the approved filing one design. It included 72 lots on 36.1 acres. And again, like Garrett said, really, the changes that we're talking about are going to magically appear here in a second. There you go. So that's really the changes, what you kind of see in the pink on this drawing. So we're taking some of those 3rd-acre lots and making them closer to 7,000 or 8,000 square feet along that edge. We think it just is better compatibility with what could happen adjacent to it in the future. So we've taken it from 36.1 acres to 33.2. The PDD density for 10W is 174. We're using 45 of those, so there's, remaining 47 of those, so there's obviously some remaining there in 10W for future use. And then 11W, 41 lots are permitted under the PDD, and we're using 32 of those. And the rest of those will be transferred into a different funding area at some point. So again, all this shows when it comes up. It's the way it always gets me.
That's good. That's a good location for high density.
Yeah, I think so.
Plus you're going park and everything's going out there.
Yeah. So what this shows, and it's a little bit hard to see, I think, but 11W is this area down here on the far left, bottom left. Is the 11W planning area. 10W is both in the middle and up along the right side of the sheet up there. So those are both 10W.1 and 10W.2. That's all I have.
So
Simple.
I have a question about.
Sure.
I see there's some turnarounds. I'm not sure. It's hard to decide between the turnarounds and the trash. So
So there is actually one turnaround, right? Actually, I don't think we have any turnarounds. I don't think we have any
then maybe these are trash.
They're trash. Yeah, that's trash. These aren't long enough to need turnarounds. You know,
So
they don't
I
exceed
would
1,000.
think that you would not want a trash on your lot line and your custom home. So is there a way to put that somewhere else? Because I think that's gonna be very, 2 lots are gonna be really hard to sell.
Well, we'll appreciate the comment.
This. I mean, I know that Clark spends a lot of time and builds a nice trash thing, but. You don't really want trash and things like that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, more of a comment if I could, as we begin to move into West Mountain here, I do a fair amount of bike riding up under Kings Crossing. It's great to access the trail that leads up into Leland Creek. And Grand Park Drive is a divided street coming up to the crossing. And it has curbs on both sides of just a single lane, so it's pretty difficult to be in that. And there's a sidewalk on one side of Grand Park Drive. Not a sidewalk, there's a sidewalk, I believe it'd be kind of the north side, basically. And that one on the other side. So what that leads you to do is actually, there is a sidewalk on both sides, sorry, yeah, there is. And but that sidewalk on the side towards the medical center ends at the traffic circle. And so you kind of jump out into the traffic circle at that point, and crosswalks and traffic circles are kind of, there's a accepted design for those, and the crosswalks, cross a little separated from the traffic circle. But anyway, just a vision of, as you guys develop more and more in West Mountain, that some of that pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure will be finished off on Grand Park. It's nothing major, but as we get more people over here and especially with the medical center, everything that's happening on the other side, would be helpful to have all that a little bit more seamless.
So we do have a trail as part of this along the north side, or the
Yeah, so
side that we're
that
that will
separate-
continue on through.
Yeah,
at
that
least along
separate
this.
trail leads to the underpass trail, which is great.
So that's
But it's quite a ways from the intersection. And so it just, the path of least resistance is what you typically follow. So the sidewalks, if they were continuous, or at least some crosswalks that led you back to that trail would be good. So just something to look
something to
at.
consider.
Nothing that would hold this up at all, but just mentioning that, so.
So I have another question. What's the timeline? Are you trying to break ground this summer? Is that the goal?
That's the goal. The goal is to get
So
this
we're
out to
getting
bid
close.
yesterday.
All right, well, that's.
Yes. Get this moving.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Any comments from the public? Comments from those online?
If anybody online would like to speak, please raise your hand.
Okay, so, take a motion to close the public hearing.
Moved. Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. So any further discussion from the board?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve Grand Park West Milton filing number 1. Revised FPDB and final plat.
So there's a motion copy in the packet, right?
The resolution.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the resolution.
Oh, okay.
2025-01 is the resolution number.
Okay. Resolution 2025-0102.
Second,
I do.
so, okay, thanks, Bob. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, so move on to comprehensive plan, Clayton Court concept and feature land use maps. That is a fairly recent addition to the agenda, to the packet.
Yes, so the materials in the packet were added on Monday. We've been working with our assessments to finalize these items. And I will turn it over to Nora and her team to kick this off.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Well, then,
We can-
if we could,
Is now better?
It's like
square.
Still pretty big.
Just a little square in the top
Can you hear me?
Move it.
Just the one, just click on that one square.
That's a little better. Go ahead and give it a try.
And hers.
Just speak out of the keyboard.
Or you can just remove the pen from the blank.
There we go.
It's a little quiet, Nora, but we can hear you okay, so.
Test, test.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm going to share my screen. We've got a little presentation here, but thank you so much, everyone, for your time tonight. My name is Nora Bland. I'm the Director of Planning at Cushing Terrell. We're very gracious to be able to work on this plan with your community and really get to start to create a vision for the future of your wonderful community. So I have a little agenda here. I'll talk a little bit about what we heard from our focus group sessions and kind of what that looked like. I'll turn it over to Art Melito on my team. He is a landscape architect, urban designer, and has really been kind of the creative mind behind a lot of the downtown vision. And then we'll talk about the future land use map and some of the designations that we've come up with in collaboration with the community and staff. Wow, this is pretty slow, huh? Okay, so I wanted to kind of go over our engagement schedule and where we are thus far. I knew it was going to do that to me. I mean, we kind of kicked off the project back in September, July. Sorry, wow, this is quite slow. I can't tell if it's my internet. there we go, June. We launched the website and then did a community survey from August through September, and then did our kind of kickoff outreach event, really trying to get the community to understand what the project is and why it's important to get involved throughout the process. So we did the summer concert series and got a lot of engagement with the survey and with conversations with folks through that event. We had some initial updates to you all and the board back in October. Then we had our stakeholder interviews or our focus group meetings that I'll speak about next, from October through November. Right now, here we are doing these updates with you all and the board next week. And then we will have our first open house in March, where we'll really talk about what we found from the existing conditions, really present some of these initial concepts for Clayton Court downtown area, and then collect feedback. And then in June and July, we'll do some pop-ups, another open house, and a survey. And then we're really looking towards fall or late fall in terms of coming back to you all with a draft plan and then some ratification hearings. So the way that we came up with the topics for the focus groups was really looking at kind of what the community, what's buzzing around the community, some of the things that are either hot button issues or things that people are excited about, just really topics that we felt needed to be incorporated within the plan, and then areas where we could identify stakeholders, that we could bring a group together to have some productive conversations and to really get feedback. So these are kind of the key focus areas from each of our focus groups. And we did have some conversations with developers in the community, that I won't touch on here because it's still kind of in flux, but these are kind of the larger topic focus groups. So for sustainability and resiliency, we heard it's really important to preserve and restore natural resources, look at alternative energy and energy efficiency, and then multimodal transportation options. For arts, history, and culture, continue the fundraising efforts and momentum behind the Arts Center. Look to potentially look to the DDA revenues for an arts fund, and then leveraging passenger rail and all of the pedestrian activity that could come along with it. Downtown development and housing. We heard from the housing partnership that the goal is really to increase workforce housing by 500 to 700 units by 2027 in the partnership area. Supporting the business community, attracting new industry, building out whatever the vision for downtown Fraser out of this effort becomes, really being a mixed use hub, walkable, and better interaction with the river. Supporting the short-term rental market, that's really critical to your economy and tourism in the area. Community services, providing healthcare locally so that residents and visitors don't have to travel outside the county. A lack of childcare services and services for older adults, and then providing more behavioral and mental health locally. For parks, recreation, and open space, we heard maintaining grant funding for the Headwaters Trails Alliance and understanding how important that is. Highway 40 crossings and trailhead parking, more opportunities for indoor recreation, and then what opportunities there are for micro transit, really to connect visitors or residents that take the train to whatever destination that they're coming to. Mobility, last mile connections to the train station. It's kind of similar to what I was just describing. Lack of sidewalks in Old Town, again, crossings on Highway 40, need to expand Lyft service in Fraser, and then Lyft meaning the bus, and then managing traffic and decreasing that single occupancy vehicle traffic on Highway 40. community needs and quality of life, looking for funding opportunities to provide licensing for childcare providers, looking at a sales tax. Summit County did something like this as a case study, and then opportunity for after school outdoor based programs, youth experiences, and nature based learning opportunities. The library is interested in serving more teens and seniors by making improvements to digital resources, clubs, and better outdoor spaces. And then a bus stop or station at the library would help improve awareness and accessibility. And then really continued collaboration with nonprofit partners when it comes to housing, childcare, and services. So those are just some high level takeaways from our focus group sessions. We had really great engagement with various stakeholders throughout the town and the region on these conversations. And I think they're really helpful in informing some of the recommendations that we'll put together for the plan. And then with that, I will turn it over to Art to talk about downtown.
Greetings. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. So I just wanted to maybe start off a little bit, kind of explore high level, I guess, what is the purpose of this plan? I think in my mind, it's really kind of an aspirational piece in nature. It's intended to provide a bit of a framework for the future that's integrating the desires of the community. And I think really a good point to kind of facilitate discussion, and it also becomes a bit of a reference to help inform decisions moving forward in kind of a clear and consistent manner. You can go to the next slide. And when we kind of started looking at the downtown area, we've got a couple key pieces. We've obviously got Highway 40, we have Clayton Court, and then not too far away, we've got the river and the river trail. A lot of these are pretty close within proximity. There's not a lot of depth between those three items. So some of the key considerations that we looked at in terms of that analysis were kind of the parcel size and that depth size, just to kind of understand where there might be some opportunities for more substantial, larger development to occur within the downtown area. Kind of along that lines, we also looked at the access and parking within the area. Trying to avoid large surface lots, obviously, within this area as much as we can, and take advantage of, the river access, kind of having that main street feel, both on 40 and Clayton Court, as is intended. And then finally, kind of looking at the framework and circulation of the area. You could go ahead to the next slide, Nora. Really what we're kind of finding, we've got Clayton Court, which has kind of a nice loop nature, which provides some ease for vehicular use and pedestrians kind of to circulate around there. But there's not really any other connections specifically, going to the south, which I think is a little bit of a limiting factor. And also there are some pedestrian connections going down to the river as well. But maybe for some of those visitors, it may be a little less obvious for folks to kind of find some of those pathways. So go ahead to the next slide. So really, as part of this improved or proposed framework, we're looking at trying to improve upon that and really try to create a strong linkage between the highway and the river. And that's kind of one of the main moves, I would say, that we're looking at in terms of this vision plan, kind of cutting right through, connecting from Eisenhower to the river. So trying to create a framework that encourages that, thinking that's some sort of potential open space or circulation piece that also allows development to kind of occur alongside that, and really creates a good link down to the river. So that's one strong component, I think, or piece of the plan that we're looking at. Also trying to emphasize stronger connectivity for other pedestrian connections, kind of those orange and yellow dots that we've got there to the north and to the south. And then also connecting south over to Safeway to provide another connection for folks to see and access the downtown area. Safeway is a very busy place, a lot of people kind of coming and going through there. And I think there's a good opportunity to provide some connection along that area and provide a good visual into Clayton Court and downtown area. Could go ahead to the next slide. So this is a more illustrative look at how development could occur on there. And I think, there's certainly some aspects of this that, we're providing a vision plan. It's aspirational as nature, as I kind of mentioned. So there's take a little bit of liberties in terms of assemblage of parcels and lots and stuff like that. Really just to try to explore the possibilities of different options within the downtown area. So maybe starting from the north side, we could kind of go through that. Yeah, over by Easton, we have retained some of the existing buildings that are important, like the distillery and some of the secondary kind of distillery pieces as kind of hovering over that right now. There might be the opportunity for a little bit of some townhomes or other residential uses over there. We're showing, as shown on D, the Future Arts Center right there, and it's providing a connection over the river. That's actually the existing one right there, but just kind of improving upon that kind of on the south side. Also showing the currently in construction, the Strom development as well with townhomes and retail. And then kind of finally coming kind of to the center of that, envisioning that as a strong pedestrian area that goes from Eisenhower down to the river, where you've got kind of a series of plazas or pedestrian spaces that would link you there. Hopefully we've got some uses, some active ground floor uses that would help encourage folks to kind of meander through that. And kind of closer right to Highway 40, that's one area where we identified as kind of a larger parcel area shown. Yeah, right there. Thank you. Where you might have the opportunity to introduce maybe some below ground parking that could maybe used as kind of on a district level and shared parking across the downtown area. Maybe that's an opportunity for a partnership between the developer and Fraser or other entities that might benefit from that. One piece of that, there's a bit of a grade transition going down to the river, so there might be the possibility of kind of tucking some parking into that hillside a little bit to hide some of that and still have some active uses along Highway 40 and also maybe some liner retail along Clayton Court. Continuing a little bit further south, showing a couple potential development opportunities there. Likely still retail on the ground floor with some ideally probably residential above. That building right now, the gray one where you're just at, yes, thank you, is another building that's currently being proposed. So we've shown that kind of as context within the larger plan as a reference. Continuing a little bit further south, we show the extension of that roadway, Clayton Court, all the way out to the Safeway. And aside that, kind of the potential realignment of Wapiti, sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong, kind of coming into the Holiday Inn. My understanding that the city has some interest in kind of creating that connection and or potential that alignment over there. So that's kind of a quick little recap of that vision plan. Nor do we want to kind of talk about this, or you want to run around the flume real quick?
Yeah, I guess Garrett, what's your preference? It seems like if we're on this, we might want to do discussion on this, but if you'd rather us go through the whole presentation and then come back, we can do that too.
Discuss this a little bit.
Yeah. And it's helpful, I can share my screen, so maybe we can zoom in on things quicker. I can add comments
Sure.
as planning commissioners express their thoughts on this, so,
Thanks, Garrett.
Yes, thank you.
yeah. Of course. So again, just keep in mind that this is very much a draft and it's very conceptual in nature. Certainly welcome any thoughts or feedback from the planning commissioners.
So the, I know it's an illustration. So, but does it reflect somewhat the CDOT plans for 40 or in this area?
In some ways, yes, I think, to right here at Eisenhower at 40, this is anticipating that this would be a signalized intersection, with, pedestrian crossing movements across Highway 40. Maybe one thing that's not depicted right now that is depicted in CDOT's plans is relocating this crosswalk here. This is
Move to Byers.
yeah, so I think this is Byers Avenue right here, and I think that it's proposed that the crosswalk would move to Clayton Avenue. But that's not finalized, that's not set in stone by any means. I mean, I do think a signal at Eisenhower is extremely likely. In some kind of time frame. So
trying to weave these together a little bit, I think would be wise, so we see how it.
Sure,
how it
certainly.
works, so it might work. Because the Highway 40 plan is not set in stone, obviously, but it's a planning document that could help guide this one too, so.
Mhm.
And then the intersection with Safeway up there, is that actually where the street is now? There's no street behind Holiday Inn, obviously, but that corner. And the road leading off to the top of the illustration. Is that the actual alignment of that street at this point, or is it?
I mean, Art, you can jump in and clarify. I think the location of this intersection is pretty.
That's given, yeah.
That's true. I think the intention of where this potential road extension is shown is try to have that road alignment kind of as close as possible to the Holiday Inn, such that other land could be maximized.
But that intersection though, and that road that kind of looks like a Y there. It leads off to the top of the illustration. That's really not where that road is. It's closer to the county road.
You're talking about this J right
Yeah.
here, yeah. So this is Wapiti Drive. It's kind of correct. This is not where Wapiti Drive exists today.
It
It's
might be worth putting it there because I think that alignment really is okay at this point. So.
Yeah, existing, it comes in a little bit closer over to where the I think it's where the yeah, there you go. I don't know if it's on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, right where that Holiday Inn entry comes in essentially, yeah.
It works pretty well. I mean, that's, anyway, just a minor.
I like the idea of having Wapiti Drive actually turns right west of where that pond is. Connecting to Porter Drive instead of connecting.
Me sharing. All right.
So I'm not lining up with the Safeway road down or.
So where the kind of looks like a construction site right now.
That's where the well house is, yeah.
There's a well house there. If we could have a cut through there, then we could eliminate one of the bridges over the Fraser River. And have more open space, so it's potential development space where current Wapiti goes.
Yeah.
But also we keep people who are driving around looking for parking off Clayton Court, they don't keep them from turning down Wapiti and parking in the neighborhood. Because they'll have to go back down to 40 and
And then that street, Wapiti there, that ends up in Mercy, right, with the fence or gate, I mean. That, there's some opportunity to take that Wapiti Drive and move it farther to the east. And that natural gas pipeline and possibly connect connect it all the way over to the street to eight, so. So that would give us another north-south path on the other side. of the road. Yeah, and not get it.
Kind of making the connection back. I mean, I think the low hanging fruit is this is gated right now,
Right,
but I certainly understand. You know, the perspective of sending traffic right through, you know, repeating those.
yeah. But right behind it, there's some easements there and.
Sure.
And that could possibly connect through, so.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
It's good to look at that broader context. So I think realignment of Wapiti is something that we would certainly look to do if we pursue this road extension kind of parallel behind the lady. Go back to that.
These north-south paths through town are extremely important to look at those and on the west side as well, obviously with the parkway, so. Discussion? Illustration? Starting the presentation.
Any thoughts or comments?
I'm curious what Greg and Kevin have to say, but we're gonna be talking about them shortly.
Yeah,
anyway,
sure.
so I don't know if we want to talk to him,
Yeah, do you,
bring him up now.
yeah, we could, yeah, you guys want to, oh, we just lost.
Greg just left, so.
Big jump in.
Yeah.
Kevin Rifkin
Name and, yeah,
with Out West Development. We're doing Strome. I'm gonna be talking to you about another parcel down the road here tonight that we might change the name after some feedback from these gentlemen over here. I think it's a great plan. We're seeing, so I was down at our construction site yesterday all day. And there's a lot of construction going on the road as well. But even just on Fraser Ave, from where we were 2-3 years ago to where we are now, we're seeing a ton more circulation of people. And then we went and had lunch or late lunch at Birdie Lounge and counted the number of people just walking down the path across 40. And within an hour, there were over 50 people just walking down and kind of using this new area, even though most of it's under construction. So looking at this and looking at kind of just the circulation, I think that's the biggest key as we move forward. Is creating, first of all, an area where people want to go and hang out and spend time. And then two, want to get out of their cars and go into stores, spend money. And that's going to be a combination. I think these guys did a really good job personally. There's a few, this is obviously illustrative, that there's a lot of things that are going to change, go with code, but creating something where there's a lot of people either living down here, have a second home down here, and then a good amount of retail that people want to go to, restaurants, bars, shops, and then creating that central piece there, FGH, where people just circulate through, I think is going to be the most important, and then getting the connection eventually where you can drive through. So overall, I think the plan is great. The one thing I've been talking to Steve Fitzgerald a lot about is just the economic impact of other things being done. And that's what this plan signals a little bit to me is, yeah, it's great when you look at all the pieces, but the more pieces we can put together quickly, the better the economic impact for everyone is. And whether that be the connection, the road, retail, getting there quickly, it benefits. We're still at the point where rising tides raise all. So we're talking to some retail, and we'll bring it up on our presentation. We're talking to retail tenants now that we're trying to get down there, that are saying, yeah, we want to be down there, but we don't want to be down there first. We want to be down there after this restaurant's open. And so I think however we can expedite to get to something close to this, will benefit everyone down there, and then also benefit Fraser Beer Co., the distillery, everywhere else around this area, because people will come down here once this is a little more built out and not just go get a sandwich here. They'll go shop, buy some clothing here, get a drink here, get breakfast here. And it creates a really nice ecosystem that people pull off 40. So very long-winded answer saying it's a very good plan. We like it. We would have some minor changes, but I don't think anything crazy. Thanks.
So I was just curious on the new building that's under construction, does that have a restaurant space facing the river? Or?
No, so that has a restaurant space right where the mouse is. And so that restaurant space looks straight down at the train station.
Okay.
And so we'll share some cool drone video we got. But what we did there is from the train station, if you're looking straight down Fraser Avenue, and we're still negotiating with who's going to go in there, we have a pretty good idea. You can get off the train and see that someone is making your breakfast on a straight shot 300 feet away. So with the idea that you get off the train and like a moth to a light, you're drawn straight down.
So no, nothing facing the river yet. No.
Nothing on the little site facing the river. We have some grand plans for some riverfront retail.
I think that's gonna, for the riverfront eating, I think this is gonna be I think that'll draw people like. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's,
Fireflies.
yeah.
Get 'em down there.
And that's something I think once, probably in one of the next conversations we have with the planning committee, we want to propose some riverfront restaurant idea that we have with a really good restaurant operator. Because you're right, that's something that people will seek out.
Yes. Destination type.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One other thing real quick that came up, I think, in our discussion with DDA and staff was, parking's kind of a challenge here and is a little bit limited and trying not to have surface parking, obviously, everywhere, as I mentioned earlier, but maybe even the idea of having some sort of lot maybe over by the station where you might be able to have folks easily park over there and walk that extra block to downtown. Obviously, we want to make sure that it's not hogging users of the train as well, but just wanted to mention that as well.
And I think the tie we've long talked about a short business street on Eisenhower where the brewery is. That tie across the street, I think will help foster that Main Street off US 40 block long business district there as well potential. So.
Andy, do you mind if I just have a couple of quick
Sure.
comments?
Hi, Clark Lipscomb for the record. And really nice plan. And for that part of town, I guess, is this part of the comp plan?
Yes.
But how's it gonna be characterized in the comp plan?
I guess that's kind of to be determined. It's certainly just going to be a conceptual vision plan. I don't think it's going to certainly won't directly change any code. I think it's maybe up to the planning commission whether we would like to say amend the Riverwalk district code to reference this plan and say something along the lines of proposed development should strive to conform with this plan or language similar to that. But I think it's certainly not regulatory. It's just more of a concept vision plan.
Well, I guess the point that I would make, there's a couple of things on here I think are completely unrealistic. They're nice pictures, but I'm a very much, as you guys know, an optimist, but and I draw some pretty cool stuff, but I'll give you a dose of reality. The thing on Highway 40, the plaza concept, absolutely not happening. No way, no how. I don't see how that ever happens. And I deal with CDOT. I've dealt with CDOT extensively and Miss former Mayor Peggy Smith helped me extensively with CDOT, so she understands what I'm talking about. So I mean, I think it's great to draw very cool plans, but have a little bit of reality to it. The crossing of Fraser River, additional crossing. I don't see how that happens with the wetlands and whatnot in there. I would scrap that and use Wapiti Road plus the cost of it. There's no reason to do that when you've already got Wapiti Road there. And I still question and think the crossing of St. Louis Creek is a big issue on the north end of this project pertaining to the protective covenant over St. Louis Creek and the wetlands that are associated there. I realize the town's working to try to address that, but knowing my dealings with the Army Corps of Engineers over years and years and years and years, I think you got real challenge there. And I think you've got other alternative roads that the Corps most likely will direct you to go use before they'll let you put in a new one. and just knowing what their regulations are and their covenants. That's kind of the reality, right? Big picture. I'm curious why this doesn't have anything on the west side of 40. Because if I'm kind of conceding this whole area, I think of Fraser when I drive through. And I think of it when I frankly hit the bowling alley theater and Hernando's Pizza. Believe it or not, that end of town is in Fraser.
Sure.
And Andy, we've talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
And I think 95% of the town isn't necessarily represented very well. In this, you have multiple business centers. And some business centers that are like key and crucial to a wholesale different type of development, retail and resort and lodging, and specifically, you know, the public rec center. It's identified on one map as a government property. I think I make it clear it's a public rec center. We have a medical center going in. We have a bowling alley theater. We have 2 other retail centers going in right now. Hopefully, we'll see what happens, you know, with the uses in those. But the reality of it is, I think you've got the redevelopment of Old Town Fraser, which I'm a big advocate, full supporter, and wish these guys the best of all luck in succeeding, because it's good for everybody. Rising tide does float all boats. And quite honestly, it's pretty ugly today. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, I know that nobody likes to say that,
Oh,
but it's, I mean,
Trailers.
there's some really, everybody's shaking their heads just for the public that can't see. I think we all agree it's pretty ugly, and that drawing, if some of those things happen, could really enhance it and improve it. And that's a big benefit to everyone that lives in the community. But I think you might want to broaden that spectrum at a minimum to the west of 40 over to the railroad, and perhaps focus on integrating the train station in there and some of the parcels there that likely will be redeveloped. I mean, granted, you know, there's businesses there in a number of those buildings, but I think there's a high likelihood that some of those buildings are really old, tired, and could likely be redeveloped as well. That would be complementary to what you've got drawn on the east side of 40. And you've got less of a grade issue. And I think if you're going to fix that corridor down 40, which is more meant to get people to say, wow, where am I? Right? Because right now you just kind of like head down and I want to get through here. But I think big picture, maybe broaden that scope out. And then I want to make sure that this comp plan recognizes Rendezvous and Grand Park and what we're attempting to do down there, which is what I would characterize as a wholly different business development area in Fraser. Complementary, I think, to this very small boutique type stuff that they're trying to do in Old Town Fraser, but on a larger, more resort oriented scale. Being, you know, hotels, it's where you can actually build more substantial, larger things that will benefit the town, both from a sales tax and a job creation perspective, in probably far greater ways than the redevelopment of this small area. I think they're both necessary and important, but I just want to make sure that the comp plan doesn't neglect the PD development areas and that mixed use. And as well as, I mean, frankly, I mean, we have a pretty cool plan in on the ski broker building right now and that redevelopment. You know, who knows what happens with Murdoch Center 10 years, 15 years from now. This comp plan has a long life. And then you've got Ted's furniture store and Moonshine and that strip right there, which also is part of that Highway 40 corridor that needs to be enhanced and improved. Right. I mean, that quite honestly, you know, I don't know what Emory does there with all the stuff that's always for sale and always changing. Not great. It is what it is. But you know that sometime in my life, that strip of land that where Ted was trying to develop the little residential thing, all the way down to the turn in at Safeway redevelops. And I think it's important that the comp plan be representative of these areas and how they can be. I think it's very important to highlight the complementary nature of them. They're not competitive to one another. They're totally different. But I would like to see the comp plan to be focused on all of Fraser, not a very, very small area of it. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Parker.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thank you. On this illustration, maybe we'll move along.
Yeah, so Nora, if you want to go ahead and move on to the future land use map.
Sure, yeah, can you all see that now?
Yes.
It's not the map, but yes, okay. So great segue, Clark, thank you for that. So we're going to talk next about the very preliminary draft future land use map, which zooms out from the downtown vision and really looks at Fraser and its surrounding areas. I know you all are the planning commission. I will very quickly highlight kind of what future land use is and what future land use is not, because from my conversations with staff, it sounds like you don't really currently use the future land use map from the 2010 plan very much. So really it's a tool to illustrate the community's vision for growth, guidance for decision making informed by the public history and landowners, and it is amendable. So if you adopt a future land use map in 2025 and decide in a few years that you want to amend it, that is a process that you can go through. What it's not is regulatory. It's not zoning. It's a guiding document, although it can help inform changes to the zoning code. It's not a development plan, and it's also not a brand new concept, as it was included in the 2010 comprehensive plan. So again, it's really just a geographic representation of the desired future use of lands within Fraser and the 3 Mile planning area. It's used to inform, it forms the basis for decision making when it comes to land use. It shows the desired locations and patterns of growth. Really, it can be used by developers to understand how the community wants to change over time, property owners who may be interested in rezoning their property, and then staff and you all to understand how a proposed project might align with the community's vision. And then the other part of a future land use map are the future land use designations. They really articulate the general character of the uses that are identified on the map. They can be on a spectrum of more prescriptive to more open to interpretation. So we can talk about that in a little bit. And then you have the option to include envisioned density or intensity range when it comes to future land use. And then I'll expand on that in a little bit, but
Can you get a picture of Old Town Fraser buildings? If we're gonna
this
keep
lag
this
is
document as a working document. I don't know what those are, but those are in town.
So I would.
no, that was sorry, that
Sorry, go ahead, Maura.
oh, this was an example of a future land use table from the comprehensive plan that we did for the town of Carbondale. So it's just an example image of an area and then some descriptions of what that looks like.
We'll get you a Fraser picture.
Yeah. Yeah. There will certainly be Fraser pictures.
So
in the
this is,
final plan. It's
yeah,
just that-
yes, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So this is your future land use map from 2010. And then really what we did when first drafting this new version of the future land use map, our considerations were community input, infrastructure availability and capacity, transportation infrastructure, some natural constraints like floodplain slope, sensitive lands, conservation easements, plant, projects that are already planned and permitted, special districts like the DDA. We looked at the 2010 future land use map, current zoning, projected growth, housing need, and economic development considerations. And then we looked at what those future land use designations could be and some examples in your current community that could help really explain or provide some visual examples. So low density residential is something like Winter Park Ranch. Medium density is something more like Ptarmigan. And then higher density is more like the Elk Creek condos. And again, this is all very draft, and this is why we're coming to you tonight, because we're really looking for feedback. So feel free to take some notes and give us that feedback. But commercial is more just really that sales tax generating use. Mixed use is more of that district level. We want people to live and work and play all in a walking distance. Mixed use industrial flex is a mouthful and also maybe a little confusing. And so that's something that we'd love to talk through with you all tonight, but really thinking about some creative ways to bring in more manufacturing or light industrial, well-paying jobs that could potentially serve some of the recreation businesses or other ways to really bring in industry that can help enhance the identity of Fraser and then also allow folks to live or earn a good wage and live in town and not just be so reliant on the ski resort for employment. And then also co-locating that with some office uses. This category is really more natural lands, recreation, and then public uses. So we've got forest and agriculture, parks and open space, public uses, conservation easements they're just already in place. We're not assigning any land uses to be in a conservation easement that aren't already in one. Water bodies, again, what exists and then what we might want to protect in terms of a buffer around those water resources. And then there's some that we haven't quite determined yet. And again, I'll leave it up to Garrett in terms of what the discussion is tonight, but that is on the table and we're looking for feedback on that. I'm going to actually just go back to maybe actually, Garrett, do you have the future land use map if you want to maybe pull that up?
I do. So we'll start with the kind of within town boundary map.
Sure.
As you were talking, I went ahead and added a comment of my own. So, but certainly we can, again, fly around, look at specific parcels, specific areas of Fraser and talk through this. I don't know what would be most helpful for the planning commissioners to look at maybe certain areas or just go north, south, south to north.
I think we talked about a couple of things already, the north-south routes on the east side, west side. West side would be the Fraser Valley Park things, so. Please discuss the connection to connecting that ties now with the prisoner of war camp.
So extending this connection here.
Right.
Right.
And what other connections on the east side that would go behind. So is that Mercy Housing or is it PD Townhomes?
With PD. With PD, yeah. They're kind of doing something like this.
I think it's important to have these discussions too in the quality of life, speed limits and noise ordinances. Become more densely developed, we need to really have serious conversations about those.
Anything else catching anyone's eye?
So, hey, I mean, obviously CDOT is a big player in this whole thing. Has there been any thought about roundabouts anywhere in town?
I think that's certainly a discussion that will be had as they work to finalize the design. For the Highway 40 expansion and capacity improvements.
Modeling for 40 is, it's just too much traffic for one of them, right, Roger?
I think
Putting it in the ski area.
yeah, so I think within the Northwest TPR plan, 10-year plan that we're gonna be expanding on tomorrow. We have roundabout at Mary Jane entrance, roundabout at Winter Park Resort main entrance, potential roundabout at Lakota. And then we didn't request any roundabouts through Fraser.
Talked about one safe by the for, but that seemed to not model out.
It didn't model out. I think space was one of the reasons.
Also, so much traffic we need to for.
Yeah. I believe they're looking at a light either at County Road 8 or 5. And yeah, that's no. So no roundabouts through downtown Fraser.
The 10-year plan may show these changes to the street alignments and things that they talked about in Fraser, or.
So this 10-year plan is like a project prioritization.
Mhm.
So Highway 40 expansion through Fraser is in that, and they're really kind of redesigning what they designed about what 6 years ago, 10 years ago. So we should have that back. I'm not sure within the next 6 months.
It seems, it's amazing what they did in Breckenridge to get 9, not even the through route through Breckenridge, and long after Breckenridge had developed. And I guess there's really no opportunity to do something similar in Fraser, but if we have these alternative routes that at least can carry local traffic and allow locals, people that are more familiar with route finding, to be off the highway, and to get across town, we could help. Plus, but I think it's extremely important that these streets that we're talking about possibly happening need to be designed so that they're not conductive to, they don't allow higher speeds. Bump outs, all the things you can do with a street to make it hard to plow. That's something other than speed bumps to visually confuse a driver and slow them down. There's a lot of good. Killed by a Traffic Engineer, have you heard of that book? It's a great book. It's an traffic engineer that talks about a lot of these things and how traffic engineering has really kind of led to more problems sometimes than it's solved. It's hard to find it out. Yeah, heard an interview the other day. It's pretty neat fact. Anyway, so route finding, if we can find ways to do that, but not impact pedestrians overly in neighborhoods. Too, so. And we can help sell it to the neighborhoods as well. So
question along the same lines. Has CDOT looked at, we talked about this, too much volume of traffic on 40 coming through Fraser. We also talked about too high speeds from the time you leave Winter Park and that stretch down through, including where, come up to the Murdoch Shopping Center, that stretch down through there way too fast. We had a pretty bad accident down there just a couple weeks ago. Have they looked at the possibility of separating traffic east and west on the streets through Fraser? One-way streets, in other words. Where the train station is now, what's the name of that street? Yeah. Having that one way going south or east. And
40.
and
That
then-
wouldn't do much for our pedestrian
Yeah,
use, so
we did that during, remember the construction when we closed US 40, we had, that was pretty nasty. Yeah, the turns and it's,
I think we're better off keeping them in a.
Plus it would require getting right away from the railroad, which is impossible.
So I think something I'll maybe just note briefly is that all the east-west streets kind of in downtown and Old Town Fraser actually have 60 feet of right of way. Like if you look at Fraser Avenue or Section 5, there's we could take the same kind of urban street cross section that we were planning to build on Clayton Court this coming summer and apply a similar cross section with on-street parking, wide sidewalks and that really, more pedestrian urban treatment on these east-west streets that could better facilitate the envisioned land use of mixed use. That's throughout this entire Riverwalk zone. But that is something that we're thinking about, these transportation contexts in the context of this future land use. I think today's discussion is really meant to focus on these land use designations in different areas of town. Maybe if I could just fly through them, and if anyone has any thoughts or concerns. I think much of kind of the core downtown area of Fraser is in line with existing zoning, high density residential in areas like St. Louis Landing and Fox Run Apartments, medium density residential all through the Ptarmigan subdivision along Quail Drive, etc. Mixed use designation for essentially all properties that are zoned Riverwalk. A range of low to high density residential within Old Town. Public parcels that include the library, the elementary school, town hall, etc. We've identified, Meyer lots 1 and 2, because they're zoned business, they could be developed as commercial or residential, so those are identified as mixed use. Whereas like the existing Holiday Inn, Safeway, and Murdoch's are identified as business. Same for the existing bank and Vicious Cycle. Open space areas throughout along the Fraser River and Cousins Meadow. We do have areas in Grand Park, West Mountain identified. The shapes of these came from, they were in our GIS data. I believe Jody Flory, who works for all the municipalities in Grand County, as well as the county on GIS, had these shape files prepared for the town. They roughly approximate some of the planning area boundaries. I think one update is certainly to reflect West Mountain filing 1, which we discussed earlier in the evening, but the land use designations here essentially match the proposed uses from the Grand Park PDD. So whether it's mixed use for areas that have residential, commercial, and lodging, low density residential for areas that have residential but at a lower density, and high density residential for some of the higher density areas. This also reflects the Village at Grand Park filing 3 plans that are approved, the FPDP that's approved. We have areas along Highway 40 and Rendezvous that are either mixed use in the case of, this is planning area 14E, commercial, which is the bank and the forthcoming hotel, public for the rec center and Cousins Ranch Museum. So I think a lot of this really is in line with a lot of the existing uses, but if there are any thoughts or comments on any of this.
All kind of laid out in documents, and of course, we had long discussions about where the all this on here, so.
Right.
Supposed to line.
I have a question. In regards to Grand Park, I've never seen those shape files ever. I know more about Grand Park than the GIS guy in Grant County. But I would like to make sure that you guys work with us to get the proper maps so that we don't have something that's completely erroneous and not even close to the PD plan that's approved for Grand Park at a minimum, perhaps for Rendezvous too, as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Discussion on this part of it. Okay.
And then moving on to kind of the 3 mile planning area boundary. Maybe I'll start with the kind of.
So let's just clarify 3 mile planning boundaries in Grant County's jurisdiction in North Winter Parks. So this is just a document that provides the town's input for developments that follow from the 3 mile boundary, right?
Correct, and it's also meant to help guide future annexation decisions. Certainly areas that are already part of town of Winter Park. Obviously we don't have any say over areas that are Forest Service land, like much of the land, up St. Louis Creek Road. Aren't necessarily depicted on here with any sort of future land use. They're going to stay, forestry, in perpetuity essentially. But yes, the intention is to, I guess, one, kind of document the town's perspective on development within the county, but adjacent to our town boundaries, as well as, kind of provide a vision if any, nearby properties were to be annexed, what the town envisions those future land uses being. The town anticipates this future land use map kind of expanding in a way to become a new model plan with a more text commentary discussion on specific areas, most closest to town that could be annexed in the future. So that's kind of the intention of this map. Again, I think much of this depicts existing land uses, with maybe the exception of the kind of greater pole yard area. But predominantly residential land uses up on Safeway. We depict mixed use for the area directly north of County Road 8. The kind of current vision is that this could potentially be an extension of the higher density and mixed uses in our Roosevelt Zone District in St. Louis Landing, that could taper off into lower density residential, potentially on the other side of the Fraser River. The pole yard area was identified as this kind of light industrial office flex area. That designation really comes from the 2017 downtown Fraser strategic plan, so we're kind of just carrying that forward. Kind of thinking about this area is maybe incorporating some different and not really utilized uses currently in the Fraser area. These large purple areas that are denoted as to be determined, these are actually all owned by city and county of Denver. So it's frankly kind of difficult to anticipate what the future land use might be for those. There is an existing conservation easement on these properties that we're depicting. Certainly that's going to stay.
It'd be worth researching. I think there's a conservation easement on one of those lots, Sunset Ridge on the highway too. Maybe something for seeing what that easement boundary is.
I think there's a third party in the homeowners association.
Yeah.
And the third party is that if anybody wants to develop the metal, all the homeowners have to agree. I don't think it's conservation easement. I think it's built in to be restricted.
Yeah.
But maybe more open space.
Is it like a covenant?
Probably, I don't know.
Okay.
That's what I was doing.
Clark, are you familiar with that or a question or?
No, I'm very familiar with the Stadelman Ranch conservation easement that was done by the Denver Water Board. On the meadow area on the west side of 40.
Right.
There's several municipality owned properties that are along that Sunset Ridge. I almost bought one a long time ago, when I first moved here. And I don't think there's anything down there that's prohibitive. Generally, but my one question is the Jones Ranch on here. I mean, guys, this is the guiding plan for the next 10 years. Do we want, I've been fighting with the town of Fraser over Cousins Meadow well, it was getting fought over before I came here too. But seriously, we've got mixed use development over the entire Jones Ranch north of town. Y'all are the planning commission. And think about your fights that a lot of you have had with me over Cousins Meadow. And you think that Jones Ranch property with the Fraser River going through it is appropriate for high density mixed use development? I'm sorry, but that dog doesn't hunt from my perspective and all the stuff I've dealt with the town of Fraser over 25 years. So,
I agree with you, Clark.
thank you. Hallelujah.
I mean, and that's one of the amazing things about driving out of Fraser. You've got the Denver Market on one side and you've got the Sunset Ridge, which will never be developed, and you need to continue that corridor. And yes, I agree.
And I had to kind of laugh earlier when they had conservation easement and they showed that iconic view in the meadow.
It has my house in it by the.
I know, that is a treasure, as you know. It's iconic, so it's in your world, but to do something to maintain that, it's iconic.
One note I would add to that too is the blue that you show for the public for the current wastewater treatment plant. We can confirm with Joe, but as far as planning out this far, we need to look at doubling the space available for the wastewater treatment plant, which actually could accommodate very well green space around that, as you may not want to have development coming right up to a wastewater treatment plant. So there could be some coordination there to Clark's point.
Is the yellow area there, part of the Jones property? That area, yes.
Well, I think. Paul, I think.
That's why they, yeah, do work. Get some ownership IDs on this. Ownership records would be better.
That's a good point.
That's a community discussion for sure. That's why we do these processes.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or feedback? Not already captured.
Garrett, if I could, I think one thing that we've had a lot of discussion around is I'm scared to call it the parkway, but I don't know what else to call it. But like looking at this big swath of purple here that Denver Water owns, thinking about when that parkway comes to fruition, when/if, and then kind of the development that could potentially follow. We don't have to designate all lands within the 3-mile area. And I think the feedback we've gotten so far from staff has been that let's just designate areas of potential change. Like we're not going to go south because that's literally the border of Winter Park and then forest land, all of that, forest service land, sorry. But the areas that do have the potential to change, do we want to have a vision in place for those areas, or is this too early on in the process? That's some feedback that maybe I would be looking to you all for.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah. And you don't have to decide tonight, but just I'd like to put it in your brains to think about for the future.
This is what all residents should be thinking about. I mean, these discussions are easier to have before plans are on the table. And help guide landowners, hopefully. I mean, maybe their land swaps to get that Jones property along the river swap for land that's up in the water board land that's up in the timber there. We have some leverage over the water board right now with the settlement of Ghost Reservoir back opened up again. And with that court case this last winter with the judge halted construction, or this just a month ago, halted construction on the dam because of impacts in the watershed over here. So Marie Sullivan came to me from HGA today and said they're plowing the road, those old buildings by the ball fields. They're plowing that road. And she asked the county guy why he was plowing it, because he said that we need to look on parcel viewer, but the water board may have sold that parcel where those cabins are. But we need to have a conversation about, do we want the water board selling land and inviting more development, more water use in a basin that may not have any water left from more water use. So and those discussions can be opened up again because we're back at the table. So anyway, these are overarching questions, and that's why we do these master plans. So.
Just whatever big picture concept, Clark, again, I think conceptually, when you're working out and you're looking at 3 mile planes.
Big picture.
Clark looks, yeah. That's actually gonna be the name of it. You can name those project. Big Picture Clark. New syndromes of it. Sorry to hold you guys up, but I think when you're looking at the 3 mile plan, it's important to have a kind of concept of avoiding leapfrogging, as what I say, because I think what we've got is a pretty good core plan, and I know how hard it is to develop retail and lodging. These guys know that too in this market, and to attract businesses here. But to the extent we start jumping over properties to develop other stuff further out, it actually kind of has a negative effect on the development of a town. And I think the concept of encouraging kind of core development out is an important concept that should be in this plan. I always said when we did Rendezvous and you know, it ultimately worked out, but it divided our partnership. We went to the top of the mountain first. And I think it was the wrong thing to do in hindsight. Because it was like we went all the way up with all this infrastructure and then worked our way back down. And I've tried to do it a little differently and build from existing infrastructure, because a lot of it's driven too by the town's infrastructure management, use of existing infrastructure efficiently, rather than having huge systems. It's sprawl, you're correct. And the county's code frankly is set up for urban sprawl and it encourages it. And I've been opposed to that, as you guys know, but I think just having a concept more in the plan and planning commission here, that is, you know, let's kind of focus on working from the center and building that and working our way out and avoiding sprawl. I mean, what we don't want is more sprawl. I mean, I look at Pole Creek Golf Course and that's the county's code in the development of that sprawl. I think we can do a better job and concentrate it more centrally. We have so much open space around us. I mean, my gosh.
Legacy Park Ranch is the perfect.
Another good example. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, guys.
No worries. Well, that's another thing that drives this discussion of how much you really want to say about the area around this too. So,
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think that'll be spoken to in more of the text of the plan itself.
And really quickly, I just want to clarify one point, is that assigning a future land use to an area doesn't necessarily say that it will be that land use or that it should be developed immediately. You know, the developers typically have to pay for any kind of infrastructure improvements. So to extend infrastructure to that area that we were just discussing doesn't really make sense right now, or really even until things before it develop out. And so I think it's not as, and I don't think Clark was ever implying that we should encourage leapfrogging, but that's just another point to consider.
I do think so. I mean, the Jones property, I think, is gonna come knocking soon.
yeah,
And I think the value of that property is gonna be based on the uses. And if we are talking about trying to preserve that open space, I think we need to let the buyer know that they're not gonna be building high-rise condos. So,
Yeah, and I think the kind of high level nature of what's depicted currently is just based on the current parcel boundaries. I absolutely agree that that is definitely an area that should be shown with a little bit more detail on this future land use map to communicate the town's vision of, you know, open space or even a conservation easement along the river. As Michael mentioned, increased footprint of the wastewater treatment plant and more open space around it and things like that.
It would be nice if we could extend the trail or something along the river, so that it would end up over by County Road 5. It's a thought.
you move along then.
Yeah, Nora, I'll kick it back to you.
Oh, sure. I think I have one slide left.
Yeah.
But just kind of walking you through our next steps.
Nor you got a picture of our Murdochs, okay?
What's that?
Find a picture of our Murdochs for that shot.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry about that. So this is what we're doing right now with the downtown design concept. We're coming to you for some review, and then we really want to come to the public for feedback on the design concept for downtown. And then eventually we will finalize it and incorporate it into the comprehensive plan. And then draft recommendations, we're hoping to have some preliminary ones in March to present to the public and you all, and then refine some more of the draft goals, policies, and actions that will help implement the plan. And then again, that open house in March, we are planning hopefully somewhere in town in the first few weeks of March. And that's it for
So the
me.
downtown design concept that you guys are working on,
Yeah.
will that include the area to the west of Highway 40, between there and the railroad tracks? It should include like Eisenhower, Fraser Ave,
Everything between.
and Mill Avenue.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's part of our downtown. There's the Riverwalk in with Clinton Court. But keep that in mind.
Part of the reason it should focus more on the Riverwalk is all the efforts that have gone into the fact that it wasn't that long ago that we were looking at a redevelopment of that possibly with homes.
Right.
So we're.
No, it's great, and it's brand new, but it should still be part of that downtown and the pedestrian and focus on some additional.
And everything on between the US 40 and rural tracks should be at the option of the property owners, redeveloping developed parcels. So.
Yeah, so I guess if I can maybe speak to that a bit more, and the reason why we focused on the area that we did in this concept plan is because it is more of like a greenfield type development in a sense.
Yeah.
So.
Vacant land.
Right, and I absolutely agree with you that we do want to see the area between the railroad and Highway 40 redevelop over time. It's all zoned Riverwalk for mixed use, higher density, et cetera. I think maybe out of some sensitivity to the existing landowners and not necessarily wanting to show a concept plan that just wholesale re-envisions everything. But I think again, kind of what I spoke to of streetscape improvements on all the east-west roads that help activate those properties so that redevelopment is more likely. I think, with the Cushing Carroll team, that's something that we could discuss, like a typical maybe vision for some of those areas, but not just showing, this property on Eisenhower.
Sidewalks.
Yeah,
Things like
Sure.
sidewalks,
Yeah.
sidewalks and.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
No action needed tonight. I mean, this is a.
No, yeah, I appreciate the discussion from everyone and all the comments. This will go to the board as a workshop next week, so planning commissioners who do double duty, I apologize, so you'll see this again. But looking forward to just getting more feedback from our teams next week.
Just take a real brief break before we move on to the essential discussion.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Yes, sorry, so we'll get started with the central sketch plan, please. This is not a public hearing, right?
Correct.
Okay, so, we can have a staff report.
And then we follow.
Thank you, Chair Miller. Yes, that's correct. This is the second submittal for this sketch plan, currently known as Centrum. Currently address Grand 50 Clayton Court. So I'll just breeze through some of these first slides. This is now, I think, the third sketch plan that this planning commission has seen in 4 or 5 months. So I think we're kind of getting used to this and understanding. Again, it's just meant to convey overall vision ahead of a formal land use application. The applicant is Out West Investments, property owners Fraser Downtown LLC. This is on the southernmost lot on Clayton Court between Highway 40 and Clayton Court. And phase 1 is proposed to be a mixed use building with 5 residential units and approximately 2,400 square feet of commercial space and its own Riverwalk. Here's a look at the parcel as it exists today. Here's a look at the zoning map. Again, it's zoned Riverwalk. Mostly everything around it is also zoned Riverwalk with the exception of business kind of on the other side of Highway 40 and then open space for the HTA building. This is a look at the property as of fall of last year. Certainly a lot more snow there right now. And
Construction, is that trailer finally up?
I believe the construction trailers are still there.
No, there's still a trailer.
No, I think
Oh.
that one's still there.
Still there, maybe not.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, the trailer is still there. So I'm just gonna kind of flip through. This is the original sketch plan that we looked at back in October. And here's a look at the updated second submittal. So kind of just flipping between the two. The main differences are kind of on the back western side. They're showing some open space area. The proposed dumpsters have been pushed away from Highway 40. The L shape of the building is now more rectangular. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So this is the L shape is now rectangular, fully just fronting Clayton Court. Then the proposed open space / parkland dedication on the north side is slightly enlarged. The phase 2 area is essentially unchanged in this sketch plan. So as a reminder, looking at this in a bit more detail, again, this is from the first submittal. Did have commercial frontage on Clayton Court, at least 20 feet in depth. There was some on-site parking located away from pedestrian areas, and the sketch plan just proposed one access driveway that would serve both phase 1 and phase 2. So now looking at the second submittal in a bit more detail. That commercial frontage on Clayton Court is now 15 feet in depth for a portion of the building. Really, the main reason for this is kind of the pinch point of the property line back here. The applicant is proposing, the residential units have this rear garage access from this kind of almost like alley type access drive behind the building. So I think in order to maintain that access around this pinch point, they are proposing narrowing the depth of this building, and that results in the commercial space being less than 20 feet. There's still on-site parking for the residential units and the proposed garages. And then there is that unpaved open space around the wellhead. That's what was previously requested. So again, looking back at the first submittal and some of the comments that we provided, the building, the kind of L shape of the building here conflicted with the raw water line that goes from the wellhead to the well house, which is up here. We also stated that this area around the well should not be completely paved. Again, a lot of these comments have been addressed, so I won't dwell on them too long. With their second submittal, there are still some utility conflicts with easements. They're outside of the current raw water line easement on the west side of the property. If that easement is 10 feet, however, the applicant did provide an updated ALTA survey that depicted this easement as 20 feet wide. So I think, the applicant will need to do some utility locates in this area and, certainly we could modify these easements if, the raw water line is in a certain location or, it could be relocated completely. There's also some easements here on this corner, that conflict with the building. One of them is a raw water line easement that comes from a wellhead that's on the Holiday Inn property. And that well is actually not feasible to be operated. My understanding is it hasn't produced water for many years, so I believe the raw water line that kind of has an easement coming across this side of the building is not being utilized currently, my understanding. Again, still comments that are relevant to the second sketch plan. Certainly the sketch plan doesn't include any detailed, drainage design. That's something that will need to be accommodated with their site plan submittal. Based on the conversation that we had in October with the planning commission, staff is still in support of the proposed parkland dedication to the north. Again, it's part of the overall vision of connectivity through the Riverwalk district that's parallel to Eisenhower.
There's no lines up with that.
Correct. The 15-foot depth requirement, does it meet what's currently in our code for the Riverwalk district? It does say that 20 feet is required. Here's that requirement specifically. So all properties with frontage on US 40 or Clayton Court shall have ground floor commercial uses on the street frontages. They shall be required for a minimum of the first 20 feet in depth. And there's exceptions for vehicular or pedestrian circulation and building mechanical equipment. That is why something like the access drive is, allowed despite that commercial frontage requirement. So in reviewing of this current sketch plan that has the 15-foot depth, some suggestions are either that we amend this language in the Riverwalk district zone. Can we provide more flexibility on that commercial depth requirement? For example, we provide a residential density bonus for any property that has ground floor commercial uses of at least 40% of the area of that ground floor. This building as currently proposed in the sketch plan is just meeting that at around like 41% commercial on the ground floor. So yes, with the 15-foot depth up here. So does the planning commission believe like that essentially meets the intent? The other option that the applicant could pursue is applying for a variance, because that variance would be greater than a 10% deviation from the standard. That variance would need to go to the Board of Adjustment for approval. Staff's preference is really to amend the code in the Riverwalk district. I think the specific language is kind of to be determined. We would certainly do some research of other municipalities and maybe comparable zone districts that require these commercial uses. I think the 20 feet in depth was kind of just a number drawn from the hat, if you will. The intention is to require commercial uses where we want to see them, but also not require so much commercial use to be overly burdensome to the developer and just build large quantities of commercial space that are economically not viable. So, obviously we want to strike a balance between those two. Our initial take is maybe the 20-foot requirement is not that optimal way to do that, but if there are any thoughts from the planning commission on maybe avenues that we could pursue to reword this.
I think it'd be interesting, to hear what you could do in 15 feet versus what you do in 20 feet.
Let's
What would be nice would be, maybe give them special bonus for this, would be, public restrooms.
Kevin Rifkin, Out West Investments. So Peggy, to answer your question, 20 feet is kind of what you need to, at least for the lion's share of like a restaurant, shop, whatever it is, just to have the depth. The issue here, and it's not gonna, it'll be an issue on some sites in the Riverwalk district, is that bottleneck. And so behind that, there's also an easement, so it becomes increasingly tough to build, so we had to kind of shrink it. Our thought, and kind of looking at some other restaurants, F&B spaces, is the 10-foot to 15-foot extension of a restaurant. So you have 20-foot, 25-foot depth. That's kind of the meat and potatoes of a restaurant, of something where they put bathrooms, kitchen. Within 15 feet, you have a really good area for seating. That's pressed up against the glass that you'll see, I think, in our renderings. That creates, you don't have depth of people sitting in the back and people walking by and not seeing people. So the idea here is that where it bottlenecks into that 15 feet, if you go, Garrett, do you mind going with the rendering? Is that towards that end, you have seating area and then an outdoor patio, covered patio that can be heated. So you go in and there's some potential restaurant names up here, Little Bird Thai and Gaucho Barbecue. But you go in that side, you order that side, you get your food. We're looking at fast casual. And then you sit down kind of where it says Gaucho and then to the right. And that's all seating. And so within 15 feet, you can get 2 4 tops on each side still, or larger tables just on one side, or you can do bar seating on one side and then a 6 top on the other side. So it's compressed, but if you look at some of the smaller restaurants up in Winter Park, mountain towns, and you measure and you're like, oh, they only have 9 feet across for seating. It's definitely intimate, but it's a nice, I wouldn't do 10 feet across the board or 15 feet across the board, but if you go 20 to 15, it works out pretty well.
And that's where this calculation could be, you need to look at sites. That the site obviously is tough to fit the requirements into. So
That covered patio, is that like open? It kind of looks like it's just open, so anybody could walk through it. Is it?
We'd probably throw a fence, if the restaurant pursues a liquor license, we'll have a fence there. Honestly, with the sidewalks that are going in, it's pretty nice not to have it open. It just makes it feel more open in general, but all depends on the restaurant if they get a liquor license.
And then you have a retail space in between the restaurant and covered patio.
Yeah, so take that with a grain of salt. These are just kind of random labeling. Most likely this will be one use. And our thesis, especially down on Clayton Court, is boutique, kind of local feeling. Like we'll never have Chili's down here, which probably is a good thing down here, but boutique, no more than 25, 30 people in a restaurant at a time, or a bar or a shop. That feels a little more mountain towny local. And so that's where this restaurant, if it is all one space, I think the quick calculation on capacity is 40 people max, which feels about right down here.
let's move on to the staff report. Thank you very much.
Any other thoughts on this 20-foot depth requirement? Does the planning commission feel like what's currently proposed in the sketch plan still meets the intent of the vision of the zone?
Yes.
I would rather see 20 feet as the standard and better 2 variances for 15.
I agree.
Yeah, we want to encourage a nice size space,
Yes.
but understand
This
this
is one of the smaller lots, isn't it?
Well, it's a larger lot in terms of its total acreage, I would say, based on current,
Yeah.
but it is an unusual shape, which is a challenge. I think not to go back through all our variance criteria, but one of them is
For lots.
it is, which I think this could clearly meet, given the way it's platted, but one of the variance criteria is, can the property be reasonably developed if this variance is not granted? I think it's frankly close to impossible to meet that.
Especially with the easements.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, you could argue though that the raw water line and that easement could be relocated to this proposed access drive. Certainly that's an expense, but I think the definition of what does it mean to that something cannot be reasonably developed in conformance with, in this case, the 20-foot depth requirement. I'll also note that though, this property is the only property as it's currently platted, that has frontage on both Highway 40 and Clayton Court. I think that's another consideration for a future variance request from this requirement. Thinking that, you know, this site overall would be held to that standard of requiring retail on both frontages in phase 2 ultimately.
And also because there's so little frontage on it. I mean, it's pretty silly looking building, but yet some kind of retail up on 40 years.
Sure. At least as part of phase 1.
That phase 2 is gonna. Work for that stuff. I think you're right, Brian, just. This is more of a variance type situation. Because it's very site specific.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
County feet is still a pretty good standard for minimal size commercial space.
So here's the rendering that we were looking at earlier. Appreciate the applicant providing this with their second submittal. I did want to open it up to the planning commission for any thoughts on this rendering, the building materials and colors, the ground floor windows, etc.
No, this building does not include a covered patio. This part of this building is right to the sides.
Correct, and this corner here is what Kevin was talking about as far as the patio space.
Well, that's open.
It's I guess this is meant to be covered by the second and third floors, but open.
Their own section. Right there.
Correct. It's maybe if I go to
Change that
this,
section.
it's part of the, yes.
Oh, there's the covered patio. Okay.
So it's this right here.
Oh, no.
So if you had dining underneath the covered patio. Is it possible to extend it even out to the street, or is that? It'll be a no-no.
No, there's like green space above it.
Well, I think it
Or
would,
up to.
Yeah.
Like,
I think if could potentially extend here. Onto the street frontage though would be challenging. Given that the sidewalk width is planned to be 8 or 8.5 feet. No.
It's like a green space, you could put pavers or something to make.
Sure, and I guess going back to our, overall concept.
I think all
plan,
Clayton Court could be eventually.
This general area here is kind of the proposed parkland dedication. I think certainly. The ultimate vision is to activate this space and have it, work in conjunction with the buildings adjacent to it. Having thoughts?
I was just gonna give a comment on what Peggy said. We kind of kept that open still because of that conceptual.
Just go to your name.
Sorry, this is Greg Beckler, Atlas Investments, sorry. We kind of kept that open still, because after the first sketch plan, Cushing Terrell presented at the DDA board meeting and showed that artery through Eisenhower. But what you just said, we could, if we move that utility, so we'll kind of keep the well easement where it is, but maybe move that pump house, since we're vacating, we're gonna end up vacating that easement on the right side of the pump house, since that water line won't be used. We could move it to the west and then do patio to kind of get where you were at the first sketch plan meeting of having something interactive all along the sidewalk along Clayton Court, but kind of just leaving that open. If that conceptual plan is able to happen and there is a thorough, pedestrian access through Eisenhower, through the physical therapy center back to Clayton Court, leaving that open. But I think if there's space to put a 200 or 400 square foot outdoor patio north of the covered patio, we would likely do that as a cheap way to get more seats, and I think it would be great. Yeah.
So, one more question while you're here. Could you tell us what the materials are?
So I don't want you to take these too seriously. the whole reason we tried to do a couple sketch plans is just because it's a lot less cost intensive for us. So this was what kind of our architect put out at first. I think our goal will be, you know, hard surface, whether it's panel or brick on the first level. I like some of the like hardy board, I don't know if it's hardy board, but kind of, they're panels, large format panels on that first level. The vertical columns are these cool kind of bump outs in the townhomes that we'd probably do some sort of cedar that flows into the half covered patio for the second floor residential space. And then some sort of standing seam above that. I don't take, the colors are totally not chosen, but that would kind of be the materials. We can put some sort of stained wood like we have on Coastal and like we'll have on Strom, something in that color palette, supernatural, cedar, tongue and groove likely, and then hard surface on the first level, and then standing seam above and standing seam on that north and south elevation.
Like it's not black.
We might have some.
Well, and I think after what we've all witnessed in the last week in California, I think it's really key that we focus on fire.
Yeah.
You know, and I think having those hard surfaces, not a lot of wood.
Yeah.
And it's metal and.
Well, and one thing too, I think, I don't know where they're at on heated sidewalks or not on Clayton Court, but it's probably the first thing to go. So if we're plowing those sidewalks, having something that's hard surface for sure on that first floor, that's durable and, you know, goes well with the storefront system. I just think that stone and hardy panel looks good with the storefront system.
Thank you. I'm gonna mixing that. Staff.
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah, and any other thoughts on the roof line or things like that? You know, I had some language in our comment letter to the applicant, just copied from our code, the mixed use design standards and things about, you know, trying to have variation in roof lines. I think another thing that could be pursued that Alan and I were looking at in our code is that we do allow for signs to project into the town right of way. So if there is some signage, whether it's an awning or just a canopy or a sign that is perpendicular to the building face that projects out so you can see the sign as you're walking down the road. Our sign code does allow for those to project into the
Anything to
right.
prevent sandwich boards from appearing on the sidewalks. And so damn sandwich boards on sidewalks. It's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's not something that necessarily needs to come with their site plan, but I think something maybe for the applicant to think about as they advance through the design. Our sign code does allow for those projections into the right of way up to an extent.
I think just one note, sorry, that I would just add to that too, is just consideration too of things freezing on top of these signs and dripping down onto the sidewalks. That can be kind of a maintenance nightmare and kind of a liability for pedestrian traffic.
It's just a panel for me, no more than a panel sign.
Right.
No kind of rough structure.
If you have that canopy over some areas but not over others, I think you have a lot of problems related to just freezing and watershed and those types of things.
Yeah. Was the Cossack building a heated sidewalk? Oh, okay, well, it's sure nice and dry. So.
I like the roof line, the very roof line on 655 Yampa, when Steamboat League has put in the presentation. This one kind of gives office building feel a little bit, so I know it's not final, but just kind of my 2 cents, just to kind of mix it up a little bit. Make it a little bumpier.
So I know we already kind of discussed this, but just to move along, the parkland dedication area is still proposed in this sketch plan. Slightly enlarged, just to be parallel with this building face. And I think maybe something for further discussion is if there's an area intended to be outdoor patio, does that make sense to remain as part of the, you know, private property, or does that make more sense to be town property? I think there are pros and cons to both approaches. Maybe if it's town-owned property, it has more flexibility and it doesn't need to be patio space all the time. But again, I think staff, and it sounded like the planning commission in October were supportive of this vision. This proposal again, because it helps to initiate kind of this broader vision for that pedestrian plaza area from Highway 40 to the river. That is parallel with Eisenhower. It's basically this green square right here. So it would be a important piece of helping to realize this vision.
So maybe a compromise, and this is something that's occurring in a lot of subdivisions, but people are kind of putting hot tubs and things out in the public areas. Maybe some kind of easement that's negotiated ahead of time.
Sure.
So that it always remains a patio, doesn't it? If that's part of the property, then you could see something that would include this park like easement. We're trying to do this.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a valid point. The other thing related to this, another comment that we provided in this most recent submittal is that the area, again, it's a sketch plan, so things are subject to change, but the area of this parkland dedication is greater than 5% of their lot area. 5% parkland dedication is what is required per our code. And we feel that it would be appropriate that any land dedicated above and beyond that could be counted towards future parkland dedications. If it's appropriate, yeah, again, obviously subject to review and approval by staff and the planning commission and the board. But that way they kind of get full credit for what they are providing here.
So you're thinking in terms of base.
Sure, yeah. And I think, so I guess to clarify, this area, if as currently shown, would satisfy the entire 5% dedication requirement for phase 1 and phase 2. And there'd be a small portion above and beyond that 5% requirement that we could credit for some other development.
The green space that's kind of just west of where the dumpsters are gonna be, is that pretty sloped? Is that down?
Yes.
Maybe just stay up. We're gonna very close.
Yeah, that's sloped. We had gone back and talked about providing a pedestrian access there, because that's where the crosswalk currently is. And then once we got into CDOT's plans, we kind of said we're not gonna build this, crazy cool, pedestrian access and then potentially lose the crosswalk. So the staff had put in the comments of potentially extending retail space there, like putting a patio above it for phase 2, which we'd be open to. But we kind of just simplified the pedestrian access in case that crosswalk moves to Clayton Avenue. And if that happens, it'll work out well for phase 2, and we're keen to start on phase 2 early following this.
Yes, I mean, that basically wraps up the presentation. So again, the next steps are major steps on applications under the planning commission.
Oh, great, yeah, you can. Any blanks that have been left?
No, I thought, we've been through it with staff for a long time now, just looking at this site in different ways, and I think we're pretty confident in where Clayton Court's heading, but we're still a little gun shy, so we're doing like the next smallest piece right now. But I think the way the town's investing in Clayton Court, we're investing in Clayton Court, and there seems to be a lot of synergies. And the DDA too is really focused on it. We're super keen to have this kind of be the catalyst to phase 2 and 3 on that south end, and really build that kind of entryway to Clayton Court on the south end to complement what we're doing on the north end. So I don't have much to add on staff's comments. I think for the variance thing, I always try to avoid doing variances. So if I can just, have your guys support, if that's a different body, the Board of Adjustment, maybe some of you are on it or not, but if it is something you guys support.
Same body.
Okay, well then, if that's the route we go, I just, we're super keen to get started on phase 1 and shortly thereafter phase 2. Just because, it's gonna be on an island for a season or 2 and want to get it going.
Is this a 3-story building?
So this is a 3-story building. Probably it's like a total height around 36 feet, similar to Strom. Maybe a little taller just because of the first floor retail. And yeah, the boxiness of the third floor right now, we have 3 bedrooms up there. So that kind of pushes out all the corners, but we can definitely articulate that roof line. We have room to do it above that, and I think it would honestly benefit some of our sales if we did have some vaulted ceilings in areas. So that's definitely something we'll consider.
Has there been any movement on the properties next door, physical therapy building or the house?
So the guys behind us, so there's the commercial building that got converted into like a 4-bedroom apartment directly to the north of our Highway 40 frontage. And then there's the laundry business directly west of us, just north of that lot. The laundry business is open to selling. It's just like a 0.08 acre site. So there's not a lot of, for what she already paid for the land, it just doesn't make sense for us. I think it'd be a cool conversion to another use. We were talking about that before this meeting, and the gentleman who owns the site south of that is not interested in speaking. Yeah, but no, not the Disney. Not Wally's open.
Wally's passed, by the way.
Oh no. Oh man.
What's that?
Wally passed. Wally Alves.
Oh, you did.
Recently?
I'm not sure about the exact date, but it's in a trust right now with that building.
Yeah, but in relation to this, I've only talked to those 2 property owners, and I wanted to string it all together, but
Yeah.
couldn't.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
Question from Michael. So originally we talked about heating sidewalks.
Mhm.
Is it just too cost prohibitive? I know.
No, it's still being written into the bid for it.
Okay,
You know, we did some work to look into geothermal for that, and that kind of, it was good to look into it. I think it may make sense for some negotiations to the north if we ever annex it to the north. But we're still looking at that. What's being used in other areas here in the Fraser Valley is natural gas to heat these sidewalks. So just, we're diving into that, looking at the cost analysis of that. Obviously, you'll have discussions with the property owners as far as like snow maintenance on the sidewalks versus supporting costs for like a heated sidewalk system. So those conversations will be coming up soon. But it's still part of the plan. Ultimately, it'd be be evaluating the cost value analysis for that. But the discussion so far, just from the shade of these buildings on this road, it seems to make a lot of sense. And even get some of the struggles that you have on the western properties on Highway 40 through downtown, that are not getting that sunlight. I think it'll be beneficial and help, to drive, support this effort for success. And they make a lot of sense, but definitely future discussions, and but it's still included right now in the design.
thank you.
Because there's a lot of the same shaded exposure, so the west side of the 40, that's pretty close.
Yeah, and even at a minimum, looking to put in the looping system in the sidewalks, so that if it doesn't work out where we can figure out a good connection point for heating with boilers, then we can hopefully have that connection in the future, but at least put into the sidewalk so it's there for that connection.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant or? Okay, thanks, Greg. Any other discussion from the board? Okay, a motion there. No, we don't need. No action. No action. Yeah. No action. No, so I need, so I think we provide all this, but sorry. All right, you've got all positive, sounds like some. Okay, thanks. We move on to other business.
I don't have anything.
Okay, anybody? Okay, any future agenda items?
We'll have a packed February planning commission meeting.
More than 800 pages or whatever this one was?
Hopefully less than that. But yes, so next meeting we'll be back on our regular 4th Wednesday of the month. So yeah, look forward to it.
Okay.
Look forward to that.
Call for adjourn.
Your turn. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Joy.
Thank you.